In Genesis 3, Satan attacks the words of God, the Word of God, and then God himself. Here's what he says to our first parents in Genesis 3. Did God actually say, "You shall not eat of any of the trees of the garden"? So here we have Satan doubting God's words. Did he really say that? Are you sure? Did you hear him right? Is he really giving you a command? But notice he actually twists the words of God, because God didn't say you can't eat of any of the trees. God actually just said you can't only eat one tree. He's actually twisting the words of God. But then he doubts the actual word of God itself. He says, "You will not surely die." Look, I know God told you that if you sin, there would be consequences. There would be death and separation and sin and shame. That's not true. God's not going to punish you. So just do whatever you want. And Satan wants to tell us the same thing, that we can sin. It won't affect our families. It won't affect us personally. It won't cause guilt and shame. Just go and do it and everything will be fine. And then lastly, Satan actually attacks God himself, his very character. He says this, "For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Here's what Satan says. Here's what God's doing. He's really holding out on you. He doesn't want you to be happy. He knows that if you rebel against him, you won't have to worship and live under God. You can be your own God. You can do whatever you want to do. Live life how you want to live it. So don't worship God. Instead, become God. And of course, that's what Satan does to us every day. He tempts us and he tells us that God's holding out on you. He doesn't want you to be happy. So don't listen to him. Don't follow him. Do whatever your heart tells you, and then you'll be happy. But then we see after Adam and Eve sinned against God, it says this, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths because they knew they were naked. So immediately when they rebelled against God, it didn't lead to eternal happiness. It led to guilt and shame. And the same is true with you. When you rebel against God, it doesn't lead to happiness. It leads to guilt and it leads to shame. So here's what Satan will do to you today. He will try to get you to doubt the words of God, the Word of God, and even God himself. So don't listen. Remember that he is a liar. He has came to steal and destroy and to kill. God has come to give you life. So choose to follow the Lord, because in him there's fullness of joy forevermore.